And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. I almost messed up our own name there because I haven't written out our intro, which I usually do. But today I was like, you know what? I'm going to wing it. And guess what? I almost messed it up. So, notes for the future. Never do that again. We are here talking MLS news because as the end of the regular season has come and gone, that means coaching decisions are coming in fast and furious. In Red Bull land, Sandra Schwarz and Jochen Schneider are both out of their respective positions after missing the playoffs for the first time in 15 years. We'll talk about that and some pretty big rumors on who might replace them. Then we will chat about the dismissal of Chris Armas, or at least the lack of re-signing of Chris Armas, just days after his inflammatory press conference, and we'll talk about what that means for Colorado going forward. We will talk about a new sporting director in St. Louis in Corey Ray. And if this, to me, it's a head scratcher, but we'll get into it if it makes any sense for him coming in here and what his role is actually going to be. And then we'll wrap it up with the idea of using AI in soccer, specifically from the coaching standpoint. I'm Andrew, that's Connor. This is going to be this week's MLS news, and really it'll be soccer news now since we're breaking into NWSL a little bit. But Connor, how you doing?
I am a little scared that you messed up the intro because it's spooky season.
Oh gosh. Now I understand why everybody loved listening to the me only episodes because
I'm just gonna make stupid Halloween puns all episode so that it's really
listen,
scary.
you're not even wearing a costume. Like, where's your costume at?
I am. I'm pretending to be, I don't know, what year was this? 2022, 2020, 2018 World Cup winner? I don't know. I think it's 2018. I'm pretending to be a 2018 World Cup winner.
Miserable, miserable. Listen, the one thing that you can also pretend to do while we're here is talk, pretend to have a really cool scarf collection because I know you haven't been updating it like you should be. But what do you got for us today?
Well, I don't have to pretend to have a really cool scarf because I do. And I'm bringing out the St. Louis scarf because I knew you were going to go Red Bull.
Hmm.
Understandably, there's a lot of Red Bull in
Naturally,
this episode.
naturally.
So, gotta show a little love for the other part of the episode. No,
Can't,
it's
I can't
don't
find it.
don't
It's
don't do
there. It
it.
is. There it is.
No.
There it is.
Don't make me make the face again. You're gonna have another thumbnail.
What we need you to do is get more unique scars. So I can't do that. Every time you bring one on, I got to point it out until you get
Listen,
one that's unique in your
the
own.
time is coming this month. It's gonna
You're
happen. I'm
right.
gonna buy
You're
some.
right. It is. It is. It is. I went into the archives of this scarf has not made its debut very frequently because it used to hang at my office in Alfred. It was my office scarf at Alfred, and I've switched it up. And this is probably the first time in a couple of years this one's been broken out. So changing it up, just like Red Bull are changing it up in their front office and on their sideline. How's that for a transition?
It was all right. I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Oh man, I've been hanging around with too many kids. The second you said six, my brain instantly went to the
Don't
worst, the
don't do it.
worst thing I've
Don't
done.
do it.
I make my kids do like push-ups every time I hear it, but it genuinely they say it so much, it's now just stuck right here. I'm like, I need to get away from all of this. It is brutal. Um, but anyways, let's chat Red Bull and their switch up, right? Because after a disappointing 2025 season where Red Bull in attempts to defend their Eastern Conference title actually missed the playoffs completely for the first time in 15 years. And after that has happened, Red Bull decided that things needed to be changed, to be fixed, if you will. Jochen Schneider is out as the CSO and Sandro Schwartz and this is a brutal, brutal episode for a guy like me with a list because just S after S after S. So I apologize to our listeners who have to listen to that all day. But Schwartz is also out as head coach just 2 years after taking charge and less than a year after making MLS Cup. Julian de Guzman will take over as the CSO while the head coach search is currently underway. And I wanted to get your point of view first as an outsider of what you thought. What do you think about this?
I mean, I understandably I don't think this was the best roster to work with. This was not a title winning roster. This was not a roster that was going to win trophies or anything like that. So I give him a little bit of slack with that. But when you break the playoff streak, you gotta go. Simple as that. And that's exactly what happened. I'll tack on a little bit more. Hopefully, I'm not jumping any of your points, but if I was, then that's pretty on par. But we've had this discussion before, and you've made the point of coaches can be like players, where if you're bringing in a coach in bad form, it could translate into their new team. And that's kind of the situation with Sandro Schwarz. Like he was coming in off a terrible run with Hertha. I believe he had 0.71 points per match when he was there. But I've always said this and I stick by it. I applaud that Red Bull was willing to try something new outside of recycling the same unsuccessful coaches in the league. So it was a worthwhile effort, in my opinion, but it just didn't work out. And I think it's a testament to what you were saying, in that maybe you got to start looking for coaches that are coming off of good streaks and not hiring ones that were maybe in a better situation but performed poorly. It's kind of the same way you were talking about Ronnie Dyla, how yes, he came off of a good streak the last time he was in Major League Soccer, but coming into the job in Atlanta, he was not doing well at all. I mean, he lasted what, 5 games in Saudi, and then he ended up here. Like that's not a good track record, and it translated. So that's kind of my thoughts when I think of Schwartz here.
Before I get into my thoughts, I just want to say anybody who's watching the video who may see something really spooky and scary behind me, I promise you, it's not a ghost, it's not a ghoul, it's just Pumpkin Grace.
Ah,
Ah, Pumpkin
I'm
Grace.
allergic to pumpkin.
Ah, well, she's a pumpkin for Halloween, so um, don't be afraid. I promise, everything will be okay. I will
Too
be
late.
okay. This was coming for me. I'm not shocked by this. If you listen to our Red Bull themed What Went Wrong, you will know that I was not happy with Sandro's lack of creativity in tough moments. You can easily point to the injuries that we had, right? Lewis Morgan, Cam Harper going down all season. I mean, that killed us. They were two of our best wingers. We then replaced them with Wiki Carmona and Mo Sofo and Dennis Yengar at times, and they just didn't have what it took to get things done. This is a fact. The problem was he didn't try enough to find the solution when those two or three players were not the answer, right? He ran Wiki Carmona out for almost 2,900 minutes, I think was the final. It was something like 30 starts. He just, the way I described it was insanity, right? Trying the same thing over and over again, expecting the same result or a different result rather. And there was nothing that was changed. And Mark Fishkin made a point. He was like, oh, well, maybe he didn't feel like he had anything else in that scenario. And that's fine. That's true. But you have to give somebody else a shot. You can't just keep running the same guy out over and over again, knowing he's not going to get the job done if you have other options. You've got Raheem Edwards, who was a winger converted back, right? Give him a run up there. You got Omar Valencia, who had 5 assists in the first 10 games or something like that, just from wide service. Give him a run up there. And he actually did do that after we were already eliminated. You've got Dennis Yangar, who can play on that side. You've got Mo Sofo, who can play on that side. You can throw Kyle Duncan up there. I mean, you could try a whole bunch of different things. You can change formation. You can change shape. You can do a whole bunch of different things. But he didn't. And he just came the same way over and over and over again. And we didn't get the results we were looking for, right? He seemed more preoccupied about complaining to the referees about irrelevant offside calls and throw-ins from half not going in his favor than he did actually finding solutions to his team's poor performances. And because of that, even when we got our healthy players back, I didn't trust that he was going to get the most out of them. Yes, he got us to MLS Cup. Fantastic. Thank you for all your service. But it felt more like a fluke than anything, truthfully. So then we go to Jochen Schneider, on the other hand, right? And he left to prioritize family time back in Europe. Apparently, he had been gone for quite a while, and there might have been an illness in there at some point. I'm not completely sure on that. I've seen kind of different reports, but you can't fault a guy for going back to his family. So I've got no issue with that. But I think you can look at it two different ways. For the first time in quite a while, he went out and spent on big name designated players, right? Emil Forsberg, Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting are the biggest names we've had in the door since Sasha Kljestan, probably, in terms of international success and relevance. But that was it. right? I don't think he did enough to put this team in a position to consistently win, right? Had an open third DP slot for the entire year and have had it for quite a while now. Wasted a bunch of U22 slots on guys like Dennis Yangar who just didn't contribute the way that we needed him to, right? TAM players not performing at their level, relying on Red Bull 2 players to be the depth for this team, right? That's not a recipe for consistent long-term success. And the answer of saying, "Oh yeah, we kept the designated player slot open for Timo Werner and he didn't want to come," without having a backup plan to say if he doesn't want to come, who's our pivot point? Who are we going to? That's not good enough as a CSO to me and to all of the fans who are sitting here wanting to continue our 15-year playoff streak and also become a team that wants to challenge and compete. It's just not good enough. And I think he did well enough, right? He got us to MLS Cup. We thank him for it. I don't think he's going to leave as one of the worst ever, but I think he ran his course, and I think it was time for him to move on. I'm happy that like you, I'm happy that Red Bull Global is taking this failure somewhat seriously, and I've got nothing but positive hopes. Julian de Guzman coming in, it's his first time as a person in charge of making these decisions. I expect him to approach it with maturity and sincerity to get this right, to show the world that he can do this job and this is something that he's fit for. And to do that, you have to show that you're ambitious and you're making good signings, and these signings are hitting, and you're not afraid to make the changes if they don't hit. And I'm hoping that he can approach it with bravery and sincerity. But we're gonna have to wait and see. So I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know Schneider left, like I guess on his own will. It seemed like honestly that he was, I mean, just by looking at like the numbers and like how long his like during his tenure at the team, I was like, oh, I thought for sure that he was just like let go. Just like along the lines of the same way Schwarz was, considering how this season went. But he hasn't made Red Bull. Honestly, I think he's made Red Bull worse since he's come over. I mean, it's another guy where this one is probably harder to make this argument, but another one that's coming in bad form again. His time before coming to Red Bull was in Schalke, where he got them relegated. I mean, obviously, there's more people at played a part, but he got them relegated for the first time in 30 years. And then he came over to Red Bull, took over as director of football or whatever his exact title is, and took over midway through the 2022 season. Red Bull finished fourth in the conference that year. The next year they were ninth, then seventh, and now this year they've missed the playoffs where, as you've said before, everybody makes the playoffs. I think that tenure is enough to be like, all right, we need a change. Time to move on. So if Red Bull weren't planning on it, then I think it's, I guess, kind of fortunate for them to be able to hit the reset. But I don't necessarily think his time with Red Bull was, I would say, we're close to being labeled as successful.
I wouldn't be shocked if it was six of one, half a dozen of the other, where it was like, "Hey, we're gonna let you go," and he was like, "That's fine. I was gonna leave anyway." So they just framed it as a different thing. That I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case. Um, I think that again, I would agree with you that we didn't get any better, but I would say that he changed the way that we approach things from a spending standpoint, right? We used to come in and say, "Yep, 2019 to 2023, we really didn't buy anybody ever." We had a couple of intra-league moves. We had a couple of Red Bull 2 players jump up and maybe a one DP signing. But he came in and he put numbers on the board and spent money, and it just didn't work out, right? The players he spent on weren't good enough, and specifically in the TAM to U22 range, not necessarily designated players. Though you could argue some were more successful than others. But when you think about the big misses this year, it wasn't our designated players. The designated players put up, I think the number was 44 goal contributions this year alone. That's return for two designated players, right? That's an average of 22 goal contributions per player. Yeah, that's exactly what you want out of them. It's the next step that you have to, right? And we've said this a couple times now, where in modern day MLS, you cannot just have two good designated players to carry you to the top of the table. You need your U22s to hit. You need your TAM players to hit. You need the regular salary players to hit. You need more than just two big players to be successful. And that's where he fell short.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that like his transfer policy was anything. new or revolutionary for Red Bull because I feel like the period that you were talking about, like that 2019 to 2023 or whatever period, was one where I feel like they made that change because previously I feel like the signings were we're gonna go for the older guys that have reputation. Your Thierry Henrys, your that I'm sorry to use this name,
Go
Rafa
do it.
Marquez.
No, no, we're not talking about him. You have like four
You
other
went
players you
for
could
the
pick.
big name players that were on the older side that had reputation, and it was hit or miss. Tim Cahill came over as well, and then you switched methods and you went for Gonzalo Varone, Kaku, Luquinhas. You shifted to the South American player model. And then I feel like he came in and he shifted the model back to what it used to be. Because then you bring in Forsberg, you bring in Choupo-Moting, you go back to the older player reputation model where it was definitely better, but I don't necessarily think that's the model that wins you titles anymore in this league. Unless you're Leo Messi, right? He's the
Yeah,
exception to any rule.
yeah, for sure. And again, I think the difference for me is not necessarily in success or model. It is individual, like team success or model. It's individual success, right? Those players you named off, right? You've got Verón, Luquinhas, Kaku maybe falls into this category, but you got Patrick Klimala. You've got Dante Van Zier, right? These players where it was more risky to take a flyer on a young kid that has potential and can do well, and they don't work out, right? He came in and said, let's go and stick with the solid players that we know are going to give us something in this league and get something out of it. The problem is he didn't back it up with successful U22 or TAM players, right? And we can talk about that all we want, and that'll come down the line as Julian de Guzman takes charge. But what really is going to make more of an impact is who's on the sideline, and that would be the coach. And there's some pretty interesting rumors out there. So to start, one coach in the mix is current Red Bull 2 head coach Michael Bradley, who is in the middle of leading Red Bull 2 to the Eastern Conference Finals of the MLS Next Pro playoffs and on the verge of making the final game, which is quite impressive for a guy who came in midseason. Rumors are that he may step right in at the end of the year, but there are also rumors that maybe former Metro star Gio Savarese would be interested in a return, as he's been vocal about his desire to return to the coaching ranks. But I think most exciting of all, one name that has floated around every coaching vacancy that we've talked about on this show since coaching vacancies started existing is Jimothy Curtin. And it's said by one Tommy Scoops that at the very least, Jim Curtin would be interested in the job due to location, the project, and the timing. Your thoughts on basically Red Bull going back to MLS Cup?
I mean, you know who my preferred candidate choice is for you guys. It will always be the baldest of the baldest family to ever bald. I am in support of Michael Bradley becoming your next coach for the memes, but also in like some seriousness for having something different. I am also saying that a little bit because I really don't want you to get Jim Curtin, but I think Red Bull and maybe a few other select teams might have the only shot at him if he is kind of like focusing on location. So there's probably a decent chance that that works out for Red. But listen, if there's any team that's gonna fluff it up and mess it up, it would be Red Bull. They'll pass on Jim Curtin so that they could bring in the I don't know, some assistant from the Red Bull Brazil team so that they can keep the pipeline going because Red Bull loves a pipeline hire. That's
That
what
is
Schneider was.
that is dangerously accurate. I'm worried that I've corrupted you to know this game a little bit too well, and now you're using it to hurt me, and I don't like that. I'd prefer you not to.
I just know Red Bull at this point because I've been talking to you for too long about it.
And that's the problem is you know the best team in the league and you know how to use it to hurt me, and that's a problem. Um, Listen, the one thing I want to know is what would Red Bull Global have done to pitch to Jim Curtin to say, "Hey, take this job," right? I'm imagining myself in the room. Jim Curtin sits down, and the opening line from Mark to Grand Prix is just like, "Hey, man, remember when you were in Philly and they did the whole, hey, we're not going to invest or anything, and we're going to make you play all the youth players, and we're going to play garbage soccer, and you're going to get no investment, but you better make miracles happen and win trophies." right? Remember how you did that? And you're like, oh, I hate this. How about you come to us and remember who started that first?
Do
Yeah,
the same
do the
thing, but in
same
New
thing,
Jersey.
but with the OGs in Jersey. That's right. Yeah, baby, we go hard. That it just makes me giggle thinking about like, nope, I don't know if that's the right way to do things. And then the that was the devil on my shoulder, right? Then the angel comes in and says, no. What would have happened is he would have sat down and said, you better give me this much investment over this many years because I'm not going back down that pipeline. And Red Bull said yes, because that's what I want to happen. Is Jim Curtin said, I will take this because I like working with youth players and getting them to the top level, but I also want to have investment better than I did in Philly. And I think that they can find a compromise there.
And then you woke up from your dream.
You're damn right I did. In seriousness, obviously I think Jim Curtin would be a great fit. I love the way he plays the game and how he gets the most out of not a lot. But I'd actually be interested in all three of these, right? Gio's shown that he can coach and perform in MLS. He's developed players to be MVP level players. He's developed players or teams that win trophies, right? Go to MLS Cup final, go to MLS's back trophy, right? Never forget. You'll never sing that. I wouldn't hate having him around. Michael Bradley, on the other hand, is an interesting run, right? He's young, promising, and he kind of gives me that like Jesse Marsh, Mike Petke, former player vibe, where he's going to come in and be like, hey, man, I was in your shoes just 5 years ago. This is the type of energy that we need to come and play with. And we are just going to go out and be just a bunch of guys being dudes and win the game. If I had to rank them, obviously Jim goes first, and then I think it could be a toss up between Michael Bradley and Gio Savarese. But obviously, I think Jim Curtin needs to be the number one if he's interested, especially since he walked away from a New England job and he's already turned down Atlanta. It's either St. Louis now, Montreal's filled. So unless a bunch of other teams are going to start firing coaches just to get Jim Curtin, or he wants to hold out until after 2026 and be the national team coach, which he'd still have, competition from, Dolo if he wants it, or I don't know, me. At that point, I'll probably have enough licenses to be up there. Um, I think that this could be a really interesting fit for us personally. But
Yeah, no, he's 100% your top choice if you had if any choice. I mean, he should be literally every team in the league's top choice outside of Columbus.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And actually, Columbus might need him too because Wilfred Nancy's rumored to be heading over to Scotland.
No,
Yeah, that's I think it's a fake rumor, but we'll chat about it
I hope so.
if it becomes real. So make sure you're subscribed in case it happens so you can hear our thoughts on it. Bang. While we transition to another Red Bull connection in Chris Armas. Because just a few days after his inflammatory press conference and us sitting down talking about whether he should come back or not, Chris Armas and Colorado mutually agreed to part ways. His contract was up at the end of the year, and it was really a conversation of do we re-sign or do we look somewhere else? And they've gone to look somewhere else. In his farewell message that he posted on Twitter, he said that he's happy that they created a style of high intensity attacking football and established a connection to the fan base throughout their style of play. But after a 10th and 7th place finish, he leaves what can only be an underwhelming taste in the fans' mouths after what they assumed that he would bring from year one. Do you think it was the right call to move on from him?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I mean, listen, my thoughts on when they first hired him are obviously clear. We 100% talked about it. I was not a fan. He did more at the start than I thought he was going to. But reality is he did not nearly do enough to have earned an extension, in my opinion. I mean, if we're talking old Colorado, I think the places he finished, maybe you could make the argument that he did like a decent amount with it. But they were putting money into the team. They were investing, which is odd because they normally don't do that. But they brought in like a decent amount of players. They spent 7 million to bring in Paxton Aronson. Or sorry, this is all in euros, just by the way, but 7 million euros
Euro
to bring in
snob. Convert it to freedom units or don't convert it at
Now
all.
you're messing me up, and I'm calling him Patrick and Anderson, who's not even close. I didn't even get either name right. 7 million euros to bring in Paxton Aronson, 4.5 million euros to keep Rafael Navarro, 2.7 million euros to bring in Jordy Mihailovic. They brought in Zach Steffen. They've beefed up this team. They've spent money to support this team, and he was not getting results. And quite frankly, he missed the playoffs with all this investment in a league where almost everybody makes the playoffs. If he was still under contract, I wouldn't be surprised if they fired him. I think considering how much they put into it, I would, if I were the owner, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not getting enough out of my investment. I'm gonna go find somebody that will get more out of it. And then I'm sure you're gonna ask me later about if the press conference has any impact on this. So I will wait on that until you ask the question.
Go no, go right ahead. It wasn't on my list because I thought we maybe touched on it a little bit, but go right ahead. Give me your thoughts.
I don't necessarily think that this played a factor in it. My guess is that they already had a decision made. However, I think that probably if there was any lingering hope of maybe changing their mind on the decision, I think that probably put the nail in that. And they were like, all right, we're done. We're moving on for sure. We were kind of leaning that way anyway, but now we feel a little bit more sure about that decision. But I don't necessarily think it was like, oh, you know what? I think we're actually going to give him a contract extension. Then that happened, and then they were like, never mind. We're gonna move on.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. I'll pick up from there and then give my other thought. I would agree with you. I don't think that they're especially because he came out, he apologized. Matt accepted the apology and they moved forward from it, right? It wasn't like the fans were calling for his, for his head because of the press conference, right? There wasn't a lot of pressure for him to move on after that sort of outburst. But I would say that it probably, if they had any lingering thoughts of like, maybe, maybe not, it probably pushed them to the maybe not because they saw how he's handling himself in those tough moments, right? And one of the things we talk about a lot as coaches is how do we allow ourselves, how do we take our emotions and keep them in check long enough where we put out this professional front and we are able to be leaders and good role models and then experience those emotions behind closed doors and what have you. And he didn't do a good job of that, plain and simple. As it goes towards should he have come back or not? I don't think he should have come back. I think, and I think you made a lot of really good points, right? To me, it was not a Greg Vanney situation where he came in, he was great in year one, had his roster ripped apart and was having to rebuild. And it's, okay, we give you a pass. I think he's been underwhelming for quite a while. Yeah, and like you said, it's with a ton of investment too, right? I kind of just took a quick look, and maybe not all of these came in at the exact same time with him arriving, but just around the time that he arrived. Jordy Mihailovic, Zach Steffen, Sam Vines, Cheeto Awazium, Reggie Cannon. They made Rafa Navajo permanent, and then when Jordy left, they broke the record again to bring in Paxton Aronson. This wasn't like Red Bull or Philly or Dallas or wherever, where it's like, hey, here are the kids, make them a playoff team, right? That's all we want to see, and then sell one or two of them on for a couple million, and we'll be happy with you, right? He had his options. He had tons of investment. He had tons of ability to make this work, and he failed. And I think what hurt the most and something that came out of our what went wrong conversation was it felt like he was forcing players into a system that didn't fit them, right? Cole Bassett made it very clear that he felt more comfortable in an attacking role, an 8, a 10, something where he can go forward and create chances. Paxton Aronson, for the longest time in Europe and all over the place, played as a number 6 player, right? Or a deep lying playmaker. And he flipped them. He played Cole Bassett deeper. He played Paxton Aronson as a 10. And if you notice that whenever Paxton Aronson came in, their results went from like to whoosh, because he couldn't figure out his team, right? And I don't think there was a lot of hope that there was going to be some turnaround from that in the next year or so.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I wanted to stay away from the who should replace him because Colorado is such a question mark. I don't ever know who's going to come in and step in, but I would imagine, and maybe this is kind of a bold one. I'd imagine they're going to go back inside MLS again. I think that I don't see this group going out and dropping lots of money on some international manager who has no idea what the league is or what their team looks like or how to get the most out of American players. So if Jim Curtin goes to Red Bull, maybe Gio Savarese goes back out to Colorado. I wouldn't be shocked if that's a move. Does Caleb Porter get another shot? Do they? I'm just not sure. Just not sure.
There's a couple. Actually, you know who I'm gonna pick as my shout for them? Gary Smith.
He's been there before, and that name did come across some people as an option, and everybody said no, thank you to all. I think it was one of those like Caleb Porter, Gary Smith, Gio Savarese, or other, and I think all the others were like, how about a Meteor or something like that? So like, we don't want any of those guys. Um,
I don't blame them, by the way. I
no,
just
no,
feel
I
like
agree
that
with you
feels like a
there.
very Colorado type
It would.
signing.
And again, here's the thing. I don't know if that's a terrible pick, right? The guy comes in, he gets you good, solid defensive play. You have enough talent up top that can carry you through, like in Nashville, right? Nashville had Hani Mukhtar who carried them to relevance until they can get to where they are today. He probably isn't going to win you a Western Conference or an MLS Cup, but he's going to give you enough stability to get you back into relevancy, and then you can find the pieces to get you to the next level, you know?
There's a few names on this list that I think are interesting options, but I completely agree with you. I think they absolutely go for a guy that was probably last coaching in the league.
Yeah, yeah, I can't imagine they go anywhere else. But another one we'll have to wait and see. That leaves Red Bull, Colorado. New England doesn't have a coach yet. Atlanta doesn't have a coach yet. Those are the four that are open. And St. Louis. St. Louis doesn't have one either,
Yep.
which is weird for a league with no consequences. Guys are
Here
getting
we
fired
go.
like that. But
Here we
damn.
go.
Speaking of St. Louis, why don't we talk about their new sporting director? Because I originally wasn't going to talk about this because I was like, we don't really do sporting directors, not really part of our breakdown. We don't follow them as much. But this is kind of interesting to me because of the way everything happened in St. Louis. So let me give you a little bit of background. And I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. Luf Pantsil, I think his name is, or Fantsil, something very funky. Lots of letters that you don't actually pronounce.
Great
Um,
Scrabble name.
yeah, you get lots of points out of Scrabble on that one. He was let go at the end of the season, or they moved on from him, and they've brought in or on the verge of signing, according to Tommy Scoops, Corey Ray as their new sporting director. A background on Corey Ray, because obviously, like I said, we don't keep up with the front office stuff as much as we do with the coaches and the players and the teams. Ray comes most recently from CF Montreal, who was their sporting director over there. Before CF Montreal, he was the assistant GM with Toronto and Columbus, being a part of three MLS Cup teams in 2017, 2020, and 2023, which means if anything is going to go well, put a bet for St. Louis to win MLS Cup because it seems like every 3 years this guy brings one in. So they're due for one. While at the Crew, he also won MLS Next Pro Executive of the Year in 2022 and was a finalist in 2023 for Crew 2 and putting that all together. What are your thoughts on the move? And I know you probably don't have a lot because again, we don't talk about this much, but I'm curious if you do have anything off the dome.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on this.
Ooh.
I was also curious to see what people were saying about bringing him in. People seem to be pretty optimistic about it, but I think, granted, I think whenever people are in a situation where they don't know too much about whoever is coming in, they're cautiously optimistic when it comes to their team, unless unless you've been beaten down so bad, you're like the Jets, and you're just like, you know not to get your hopes up. But people were optimistic in St. Louis. And I think a lot of people in the comments were focusing on his time in Toronto and Columbus and kind of writing off his time in Montreal as just being in a difficult situation and probably not his fault. And I wholeheartedly, and I've said this probably a million times at this point, I do not disagree with that. I 100% can understand where people are coming from on that, and it probably has a lot of validity to it. But the one thing I will say, and maybe I'm being too harsh on them, but I feel like thus far, St. Louis hasn't exactly given themselves the best track record to say that they're easy to work with because they've been around since 2023. They've already been through four coaches. Granted, some of those were caretakers, but each coach has coached for 15 plus games. So in a 3 season period, you have now gone through four coaches who have had significant time with the team, all of whom are probably bringing in different ideas and different tactics, and guys have to keep changing the way that they're playing. And not on top of all of that, your first coach was a super successful coach, and he did miracles with your team. And then the second season comes around and things aren't going as well as they did the first year, and you move on very quickly. I think we had this discussion. Yes, St. Louis was not trending in a good direction, but I think we both agreed that it was kind of fast, especially for what he was able to accomplish with the team in the first year. And I think this season pretty much confirmed that because you let him go, he goes on to the next team within the league, wins the Supporter Shield. Maybe you should have kept that guy. I don't know. So I'm looking at the situation where people are like, oh, in his last role with Montreal, like he was just working with a bit of a difficult organization, and so maybe that's why he wasn't getting results. But it's like the way that St. Louis has been in the last 2 years, I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to be so much better. Like, yes, St. Louis is willing to spend money, but the way, unless you're going to like gut the roster, the way that they're set up right now, there's not a lot of money to be spent. You're kind of cuffed on how much you're going to be able to do in this new role. So I think he's got a good track record. His time in Toronto and Columbus is valid. Granted, it was from an assistant role, but I think, you can look at what he was able to do as GM for Crew 2 and be a winner of Executive of the Year and a finalist in another year. So like that's promising. But I'm concerned that like maybe it's more of an organizational thing in St. Louis right now than it is we needed a new director of soccer.
I think it's a lot of good points, and the big one that stood out to me right away is his time at Montreal isn't really his fault as much as it is, the ownership and not giving him the tools to do his job, right? But my first initial thought is this is underwhelming. And right, because of that CF Montreal side, regardless of what he was given, they were very bad last year. And we just spent the last two sections talking about form coming into a job impacts your job, regardless whether you're a player, coach, front office. If you come from an area where you're not doing so well, you may carry that into the next job. Then I think that there is a gap between being a good assistant executive or MLS Next Pro executive and a good MLS executive. I think there's a relatively good gap there, right? There's learning curves. There's a lot more that you have to balance and get right. And I'm not disappointed, underwhelmed, or happy or thrilled. I'm just interested, right? Again, I think that if this team gets healthy and they get the right coach in, I don't think that their roster is in a bad spot. I think they've got a lot of really good tools. This season coming in, I don't think his impact is going to be super. I don't want to say impactful. I think impactful is the wrong word, but I think that he's going to have time to get comfortable in the role and figure out what he has to do before he has to start making some big decisions, right? Most importantly, of course, is going to be the coach, but we'll move on from there. But the reason I wanted to bring this up was the way that St. Louis has gone about doing this is very interesting, right? He's supposedly supposed to be the soccer decision guy, right? Hirings, firings, signings, selling players, whatever, right? Well, before he was even announced, or my guess is before he was even interviewed for the position, St. Louis already made every single one of their end of year roster decisions, and they signed Roman Berkey to a new DP contract. Some are saying that the president of the team, Diego Gigliani, is going to have a what has been labeled a hand, air quotes in a hand, in many soccer decisions. If that's the case, and you already have somebody who's making the decisions for him, why are you bringing him in the first place? If you want him to be the decisions guy, why not let him make those decisions first? If you don't want him to be the decision guys, why are you bringing him in at all? And the only way I can kind of wrap my head around this is that he's had a lot of success as an assistant GM with somebody helping him make these decisions, right? So maybe they think that if he has somebody assisting him or he's assisting somebody in making these decisions, he'll find more success. It just feels very not normal. And again, for two of us who don't pay attention to front office happenings, right? It just feels a little abnormal. And I'm just curious to kind of see how it plays out.
No, that's fair. I mean, that's like the situations where you see it's baffling and I don't understand it, but I think to like American sports where it's like, oh, our team just had a really bad year. We are thinking about making a move or making a change, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna let the GM handle like the draft coming up. And then it's like after the draft is done, you fire the coach and or you fire the GM and you get a new one. It's like, okay, well then you should have done that to start with. Like these are important decisions to make. Like end of your roster decisions is important to make. Using a third DP slot is an important decision to make. You're gonna do all that and then bring somebody in? Like that doesn't make somebody in whose like job it is to make those decisions. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I'm sure that there's a plan in there. Lots of behind the scenes stuff that we don't know, but it's going to be interesting to watch this one play out for sure because it just doesn't. There are pieces, and again, this goes back to the beginning of the last season, hiring Olaf Melberg, where it was like, or rather the middle of last season, firing Olaf Melberg, where it's like something doesn't feel right in the front office. Like 15 games and you're already pivoting, like you don't trust the guy. It just everything kind of feels up in the air. It's gonna be very interesting to see how that plays out. But I wanted to end before we go to question of the week because you're going to be thrilled with this one. A report came out this past week that the head coach of the NWSL's Seattle Reign made a very public statement that throughout this year, she has used ChatGPT to prepare against her opponents. She starts with an idea that is broad. What is the Seattle Reign's identity? Mind you, that's her own team. And then she starts asking, what are the best formations to beat all the NWSL teams in the league? And ChatGPT says, play a five back here, play a three back here, do this, do that. Mind you, she's never, and I was just reading this article before we got on here, never once has she played five back in her entire career. And she decided one day that, yep, the computer told me to do it. We're going to do it. I think the kicker to this, and the funny kicker to this is I think she did it like two or three games. She won all of them. So it did work. But what are your thoughts on the AI in the game?
I, as somebody who has the opportunity to work with a lot of AI at work, granted in a completely different type of industry, I obviously am not the coach of a professional team. I think it's a good tool to use in an assisting manner, not as a replacing manner, if that kind of makes sense. Like it shouldn't be used to replace like an assistant coach. Like I don't think it should move to the point where it's like, all right, I don't need assistant coaches anymore because I'm just going to ask this AI what I should be doing. But I think it could be a good tool to kind of like help sift through data or like be able to read certain data, to be able to like analyze maybe certain videos or certain formations. And I think it could be very useful in that regard. But I don't necessarily, I mean, the way you're describing it, it doesn't necessarily sound like it's being used that way. It sounds like it's just being told to do like very high level things, and I think it was probably just a little bit lucky to have worked out. It's a funny story, I'll tell you that. Like it, it was funny hearing from you talk about it, but I don't necessarily think that it's something that like you're gonna see teams starting to do and be like, hey, ChatGPT, manager of the Portland Timbers here. We're going up against our bitter rival Seattle Sounders this weekend. How should I beat them? And then just running with that. Like I because if that doesn't like it's super risky because if that doesn't work, my and that gets out, my goodness, you are gonna get torn to shreds for that. Like that's a PR disaster to be like, oh, we ran a formation drafted by ChatGPT. Because let me tell you, somebody that works, like as I mentioned, I've worked with AI a decent bit at work. It is wrong a lot. Like it should not be just taken at its value and just running with it. Like you should do due diligence to understand where it's coming from when it's saying that and like have a proper understanding of if this is like a valid answer. And it doesn't sound like that was done based on what you were saying.
I think based off of my work, I'm contractually obligated to say, yes, we love it and everybody should be using AI because I'm trying to sell glass that makes AI. But from my son, and we joke all the time about the soccer purists and how they never want to change anything and, everything needs to be like it was in 1885. But this is a bridge too far even for me, right? And I agree with you in the sense that there are ways that you can utilize this tool properly. I think one of the things she said is when she put that into AI, right? What's the Seattle Reign's identity? it came back with information. She's like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. So it was almost like that first one was her kind of testing the waters to see if it actually made sense. But I start losing my faith when you start saying, oh, well, what formation should I use to play this team, that team, the other team, right? One, you've got a whole team full of analysts who should be doing that, right? Or assistant coaches or what have you. Now, again, NWSL is criminally underfunded. We know this, they're getting better. They're taking steps up. They're nowhere near where any of the other major sports are. Maybe they don't have those resources, right? However, where I drew my line on this was the idea of if you wanted to get a quick overview on what your opponent was doing so you can begin to start looking for specific trends, right? When you do a game analysis, you're looking for trends. You're looking for what does the data tell me this team likes to do? If you have a computer that can give you the very, very brief overview, hey, this team likes to play direct 75% of the time, 25% of the time they're going to try play out of the back, right? They play most of the time they play in this formation, sometimes they'll play in that formation. I'm actually okay with that, right? It gives you a starting point to start your preparation for the week. And especially as we continue to drop games and games and games and games and games into the schedule and it gets compact and compact and compact, you run out of time to do proper prep. So I don't actually have a problem with that. Where I start to lose my faith is when you just start doing what formation should I use to beat this team, right? That takes away the very essence of what coaches do, right? The coaches are meant to take their knowledge of the game and of their team and apply it as such to beat the other team. Plain and simple, right? If you are telling me that ChatGPT is going to say, hey, the Gotham FC playing a 4-3-3, and your first thing is, okay, what formation do I use to play to beat a 4-3-3? You're just playing Football Manager. I mean, that's not what you get paid money to do. Excuse me. The the issue that I have with this, right, especially as somebody who's now, I'm a month away from hopefully getting my B license, second from the top, is that you need to have a working idea of the game to be able to apply complex thought and use that complex thought to develop strategies, develop team identities, develop roles and responsibilities that can be brought into a team atmosphere to win games. Plain and simple. And this feels like we are just going and saying, oh, I can just type in whatever I want, plug and play, and it's going to work, right? You met Coach Blake in our interview back in season 1. Coach Blake is one of the smartest soccer brains I've ever met, and he described formation to me in a way that made me rethink everything I know about the game. And it was that formations don't actually matter. If I asked you right now, what is a 5-4-1, a defensive formation or an attacking formation? What would you say?
Depends on how they're lining up in the 5-4-1 or how you're
Exactly.
using certain positions.
Look, I have taught you well. That's so good, right? A lot of people would say, "Oh, well, you've got 9 of your 10 players, behind your striker. It's a defensive formation, right?" Or if we said, "Okay, we got a 4-2-4," well, that's an attacking formation because you have more forwards. Well, that's not the case because what it is a starting point. Formations are a starting point, but you still have to implement roles and responsibilities and understand the players that are going into those positions and their strengths and their weaknesses, things that a computer cannot tell you or not accurately tell you with any, at this point at least, can't tell you what's going to be good or bad. And that's where the coach needs to actually do their job. It feels like we are, and to end my rant here, it feels like we are slowly and surely drifting closer towards, I don't know if you remember the 2014 World Cup video, us versus them or whatever, where the robots took over and it was the pros taking on the robots.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's where I feel like we're going with this, where it's like, okay, well, I need to win game. I'm gonna program my computer to say this, and then we're gonna make our players do this, and it's just gonna be robots. Obviously, that's not where we're going, but you know what I mean. We're taking away the human element of the game. We're taking away the decision making and the human error that makes the game so exciting, and we're just going to say, okay, well, what does the robot tell me I should do? That's what I'm gonna do. And I hate that because that's not what I'm here for. That's not what the team is here for.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying before. AI should be used in an assisting capacity, not a replacing capacity. If you're gonna say like, oh, there should be a replacing aspect to it, it should be replacing tasks that are taking too much time and are inefficient. They should not be replacing people and decision makers. which the way that it was being used and the way that you were talking about it is exactly what it was doing. It was taking away any decision making that the coach would normally be making and just being like, okay, I don't have to think about this. Like, I'm just gonna go with, I mean, I'm sure there was some thought into it, but I'm just gonna go with what the AI is telling me I should do. And that's
Yeah,
not how
and
it should be used.
no, I agree. And I think overall, and I know for a fact that the headlines don't tell the story, right? I'm sure that if you went and sat down with this coach whose name I have forgotten to write down, let me look it up really quick. Laura Harvey. Yep. So I'm sure Laura Harvey, if you sat down and spoke with her, said, yeah, again, I used it as a basics, but once it told me, okay, this is the formation, I started thinking about what roles and responsibilities, which players fit that formation and things like that. I know that's probably what happened, but it still hurts me that we couldn't figure that out without the computer, right? You don't, she's been coaching for 20 years. You don't need a computer to do such things. If you've been in the game that long, you should be able to look at it and say, okay, these guys like to play this style. They're very direct. They play this much, this much direct. They have four high at any given time. I need five to deal with it, right? So I'm going to go back five today. It almost is like I'm not going to be flexible unless computer tells me to be flexible. And again, that takes away this risk and reward, and the best coaches in the world take risks, and they take it because they have a lot of data to back it up, and they have confidence in their ability to teach it and all this sort of stuff that it's almost I don't want to say it's a mockery, but it really disappoints me that we couldn't make those decisions without computers saying, well, we have to do back five, you know, that bothers me. So I'm sure there's going to be more that comes out of this, and more information that we'll get from this. But I unfortunately think that this is probably the future. A lot of people are going to start doing this, and it's going to take away from the originality of the game. So we'll see how it goes. To finish this up, we always got to hit a question of the week. Connor got 62 responses to this one this week. We got people answering our questions of the week.
Well, that's what you think. It's just a bunch of AI bots.
It's just you on every you've got a troll farm just answering the questions the way you like it to. After the first round of the playoffs, or the first game of the first round of the playoffs, Twitter, as usual, took to its I don't want to say the skies, but you know what I mean. It went to the airwaves and started complaining about the format. This is no good. We can't be doing best of three, blah 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 blah. So I put it out there. I said, question of the week, my friends. What's the best playoff format? Gave them three choices and another. I said single elimination, home and away, two legs, current format, current setup, or anything else you can think of. Hit me with it. We got 29 votes for single elimination. We got 27 votes for home and away. We got 4 votes for the current setup, and we got 2 votes for something else. And I've actually got a couple of really good comments that explain the something else. But before we do that, of course, I need to hear your thoughts.
It's a hard one.
I don't make these easy. I need the deep hitters. And you
I
stay off of ChatGPT. I don't want to hear any ChatGPT fueled answers here.
I'm in the minority here, I think, because I think I prefer the current format. I think single elimination is too much just like hit the hot run and not necessarily the best team wins. And home and away, I think, takes away any advantage that higher seeds would get because then you're not getting like an extra home game for, your performance in the regular season. At least with the current format, you get a little bit of both. You get the home and away, like each team gets at least one home game in round one. And if you were the better seed, if it goes to 3 games, you get 2 home games. So there's your benefit for doing well in the regular season. And then you get the single elimination, which I think is better for creating the storylines and the drama in the playoffs. So I kind of like having a little bit of both. I know that didn't get a lot of votes, but I think that one is my preference.
Yeah, and actually we had a couple of people who came in and kind of broke down why they like and don't like other ones. I just like playoff soccer. I can do without the best of three, I can keep the best of three. It doesn't matter to me. I think each one brings their own benefit and negatives, just like anything else. But I think that the format would improve regardless of which way we take it if we were able to get away from the international break. That's what kills everything in the format, right? Likewise, if you're going to do best of three, you have to make it even, right? Charlotte and New York City played Friday night. Friday night? No, Tuesday night. Tuesday night. And they are currently they're scheduled to play in 30 minutes from right now. We're recording this on a Saturday. Inter Miami played Friday night of last week and won't play again until tomorrow. Why are we having one team play with 10 games or 10 days in between and one team play with 4? That stuff just doesn't make sense. There are ways they can make the best of 3 make sense. There are ways they can make home and away make sense. There are ways they can make single elimination make sense. But I think you have to figure it out internally before we can say, yeah, this is better or worse than anything else. And you're never going to get everybody happy. Let's make sure we're clear on that, right? I think if I had to pick, I think I would probably lean towards single elimination, right? It gives you actual benefit for being first. It doesn't give you a ton of games, right? And that's kind of the big thing, of course. The best of 3 gives you lots of games, and everybody gets a home game and whatever. And for me, I think it's just either way you can do it. Home and away could be the same way, right? If you do that and you just take away the benefit of finishing top of the table, I'm not sure that I'll ever come back. But just a quick breakdown of some of the comments, right? Our friend Chad Smith from For the Glory KC, who is our not so deep dive guest all the time, fantastic, wrote a very good article about how to improve this a couple of years ago. He voted single elimination, but he said anything that gets away from the international break is a win. And I agree with him, right? The international break's a big one that we need to avoid. Our friend Silver Ray also hit us with a breakdown of why he likes and doesn't like each one. But I actually couldn't tell how he voted. So make sure you let us know which way you voted so we can figure that out. But he said single elimination is good, but not long enough. Head to head is not so good because there's no advantage for being, higher seeded, and it leads to teams playing more defensively than free flowing expansive. Best of 3 gives you lots of games, and it gives you the freedom to chase the game regardless of the outcome. Okay, I like that too, right? Regardless of the outcome, you do that. Mid-South Poker Soccer says that we should cut down the teams all together and make it best of 3 all the way through. Interesting. Bry Wagner says that bring back the two-legged home and away with aggregate scoring and the away goal rule. Don't know if I love that one. Grace says we need to do anything that she wants because it's all about her anyway. And then our last comment was from Wasatch One Touch, where he said, cut it to and he was one who voted other. So I want to hear your thoughts on this before we end. Cut it to only the top 8 teams, no playing game. Make it 2 groups of 4 in each conference. Each team plays each other once, so the top 4 and the bottom 4. And the bottom team in each group gets knocked out. The final 12 move on to single elimination until we get to a East versus West MLS Cup. I believe that's how that was laid out. Thoughts on that?
I don't even know if I followed that.
Yeah, I had a feeling you wouldn't. It's definitely a little complicated. It is much like the European spots and Pro Rail race in Belgium, where they kind of like split it half and half at the end of the year, and they do one little mini tournament at the end. I think it'd be way too confusing for the American casual to follow. And yeah, I like it because I think it's fun, it's unique, but I do think it might be a little tough to follow. So, yeah, that's what we got here. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We hope this is a little bit of a longer one, but we hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts on all of the coach movements, all of the AI stuff, and this question of the week. And be sure to subscribe so you can take part in the next one. We're going to have another good question of the week as we lead into the end of the first round and into the second round of the MLS Cup playoffs. Like I said, make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcast and the next time we post an episode. And make sure you are following us on social media so you can interact with us when we do these questions of the weeks and other things that we post. But thanks so much again for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS Podcast. See ya.